Would you like to play a character that can be one of the great tricksters in the game, but isn't limited to only tricking their opponent? Oh, you would? Well, you're in luck, because behind today's secret door, the Illusion Wizard Test Drive. So behind today's secret door, the Illusion Wizard Test Drive. This is Secret Door, a channel devoted to in-depth discussion about Dungeons and Dragons, and my name is Matt Morich. All right, I have started a Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the channel, your help would be greatly appreciated and much needed. And many thanks to Marcelo, Doug, and Jamie for your support. The link will be in the pinned comment and in the description. So whenever I do a test drive, please check the pinned comment. There may have been a mistake that I made. I will usually try and put those on screen in a text if there's a mistake, but sometimes I don't catch them until the very last moment and it's already too late to add the text in. So always check the pinned comment for that, or there could have been things that I didn't survive the edit. That's another common thing, or there could have been simple omissions on my part. Those will all be noted in the pinned comment. And if you catch any of those kind of things, you're certainly welcome and encouraged to. The point is to get the accurate information out to everybody, and so we can evaluate everything accordingly. So a test drive is exactly what it sounds like. It's your chance to see how a class will play level by level. In this case, I'll be going from levels 1 through 10. It is also your ability to see how it will compare to other classes and how it will play, how each level builds on itself and how you will experience playing that character. Because it's one thing to watch a video or read a guide or whatever about a build or just, general tips on how to play a character. It doesn't sometimes give you that sense of what it will actually be like to play that character. So that's what the test drive is for. I'm going to be giving you ideas for generally how to best approach the character, in my opinion, and what I think are some optimal choices along the way, in my opinion. So that makes it a bit buildish and a bit guide-ish, but it's really neither of those. The real purpose is to experience it. It's a test drive. So for any of these test drives, when there is a subclass that's particularly challenging, I will try to make a point of talking about role-playing options with that character. I don't really have much to say here because the Illusion Wizard is pretty straightforward. The only thing I really feel that is a good idea to comment on is how you can customize your spells. You are an illusionist after all. So, and you should talk to the DM a bit about this, but whenever you are casting a spell as an illusionist, I think a little bit of illusionary flourish could be allowed. And we're talking about when you hit the subclass level. When you're casting your regular spell, that you might even have a little bit extra of special effect that another wizard might not. I am not saying that you should be trying to convince your DM to give you some way of disguising what the spell really is or anything like that. This is simply for flourish, for fun, for flavor. I think that your ability to make the spell look how you want it on a whim should be the very nature of an illusionist. But it needs to be clear what that spell essentially is. So I had talked about this a while ago now with the Warlock with Eldritch Blast about how you should be able to treat it like a Green Lantern ring. That the Eldritch bolts should be able to look like whatever just pleases you at the moment that would be fun and entertaining. There's really no reason you shouldn't be able to do that. And all the more reason, I think, for the Illusionist Wizard. If there is any caster in the game that should be able to do that, it's the Illusionist. So I think it's worth talking to your DM about. It's certainly not rules written per se. They talk about customization of how spells look in Tasha's. So there is certainly some leeway there. But otherwise, it is going to be something that you're going to want to make sure you're restraining yourself, that you're not trying to disguise the spell. You're not trying to get away with anything. You're just trying to make it fun and dramatic. So now talking about Lineage, I'm going to give you a primary pick, and then I'm going to give you two. It's really like one more definite other alternate pick, and then one alternate pick where you could go several ways with that. These would all be strong choices, and you'll see why. The first pick, number one, I think would be to play human, because you'll be able to get 2 origin feats. And of course, with those origin feats, we're going to take what any wizard should want to take, which is lucky and alert. Now, of those two, alert is the most important, because a wizard, you can play blaster wizards and all that, but you are playing an illusion here, wizard, so obviously you're not going full blaster. But I do think the illusionist needs to be flexible. I think that they should have definitely have all their options available to them. I'm going to be presenting, as we go through the spells, certainly a very balanced approach. I'm going to be actually looking at this character as a wizard, and then the illusion stuff is just extra stuff that you get. That's how I'm going to approach this, because I think that's how it's going to play the best. So in that regard, alert is going to be the primary feat that you want. Lucky is there, especially in the short run, to allow you to shore up your concentration. This will get mitigated again later on, so lucky is really only critical for that part for the first couple levels, but with human, you also get a free heroic inspiration every day. So it is that's going to be very, very useful for concentration saves throughout your career. So I think for those reasons, human is the strongest pick. However, there are a couple of other ones that are really going to be very interesting and very competitive with an illusion wizard. The first is to go, oddly enough, with Goliath. And you go Cloud Giant, and Cloud Giant gives you a teleport. It's basically Misty Step, a number of times per day equal to your proficiency bonus. You get this right away at level 1. That's fantastic. And it's tied to your proficiency bonus, and it's not a spell. It's identical to Misty Step, but it's not a spell. So the fact that you'll get that a number of times per day tied to your proficiency bonus, and the fact that it's not a spell, and that you get it at level 1, that's pretty good. And of course, you can make yourself huge, which for an illusionist could be somewhat fun and amusing. But the big reason is for that jaunt ability. Now, the other picks would be for small character races. I'm just going to really focus on the halfling here. That would be of those picks of the small races. I think the halfling would be the best, simply because lucky. First of all, the halfling didn't get nerfed nearly as bad as the other races did. It actually is pretty much unchanged, and its luck trait is really, really good. That also can help with your concentration. So if you were to say go with halfling, and you took alert, and even though you don't have lucky and the heroic inspiration, you still have the luck trait, which is going to give you a better chance of re-rolling. And remember that concentration saves are not that hard, so being able to re-roll that 1 in a very narrow range of numbers that will defeat you, that's a pretty nice bonus to be able to remove one of those as a possibility. But the small races will come into play at 3rd level with minor illusion, and I'll talk about it at that point. Now, as far as your statistics go, all I really care about here is your intelligence. We want to put a 15 in intelligence for the sake of this test drive. I'll make some recommendations, but all I really care about is that. So if you put the 15 and your +2 into intelligence, that's what I really care about. So for the other stats, I would put a 14 either into con or dexterity, and a 13 into the other one of con or dexterity, and put the +1 into that 13. Then take a 12 for wisdom, 10 for charisma, and you're fine. If you did dump charisma, you're going to have 2 extra points. Now, that doesn't help you as much as you would like, however. If you did dump charisma, then I would buy another 15 and a 14. So you'd be buying 2 15s and a 14. This is only going to leave you 2 points for wisdom. So by dumping your charisma, you're also kind of dumping your wisdom as well. So that would be down to 10 for your wisdom, but you would allow that +1, which doesn't have to make that 13 into a 14. That +1 could now be put into that 15 to get to a 16. Now, I would put that into Dex, but you could easily make the argument of putting that into Con, and then the 14 would go into whichever one. So it's really just a question of how you want to do it. I personally don't like dumping Charisma very much as a player, but those are the options. They don't matter in terms of this test drive. All that matters is that your intelligence is going to be a 17 at level 1. All right, level 1. Now, level 1, of course, we get spellcasting and we get arcane recovery. Now, arcane recovery, when we do a short rest, we'll be able to basically, it's you get your spellcasting level back in spell levels. So you get half of your character level rounded up into spell levels that you get back from an arcane recovery. So at this point, you would be getting 1 spell slot back in a short rest. So at this point, you would be getting 1 spell slot, which would be first level at a short rest. And generally speaking, I'm going to always assume throughout this test drive that your arcane recovery is going to automatically be going into recovering the highest level spell slot that you can cast. But bear in mind, you don't have to do it that way. You could take combos of other spells that of lower spell levels. And we also get Ritual Adept, which means that when we are casting a spell with the ritual tag, we can cast it as a ritual, and we do not need to have it prepared. Now, with our spell book, how this will work is when we have achieved a new spell level, we get 2 of those, and then when we get into our subclass, we're going to get a free spell based in that school of magic. We'll also have a lot of preparations. So the thing about the wizard, of course, is not only is it versatile and it has the best spell list in the game, and spell casting is the most powerful feature in the game. So you have the most powerful feature in the game with the most powerful spell list. And that is what we're really going to be focusing on here. But the wizard is unique in that if you are able to, say, capture an enemy wizard's spell book and they have spells in that spell book that are not in yours, you're going to be able to translate them into or scribe them into your spell book, or with scrolls, etc., etc. So your ability to access extra spells as you go through play is a really big deal for a wizard. And when it comes to rituals, we really want to be paying attention to them as we're going on and adding them in, because it's not only free, you don't have to have it prepared. You don't have to think ahead in that regard. That's a huge advantage. As long as it's in the book, you're good. So picking the best rituals is a critical thing to do for wizards. I'm not saying every ritual is the same, but picking the best rituals, and then whatever rituals you can get in your spell book, whether they're really circumstantial or not, is a win. It's an option. We get 6 spells to put in the spell book. The first 3 that are your typical cast spells, I'm going to suggest that you take Sleep, Shield, and Grease. Now, the Grease one is really optional here. I like Grease because Sleep is a concentration spell. So it's a follow-up spell that if you were in a pinch and you needed to cast yet another spell, you could throw Grease out there and not lose the effect of the concentration for Sleep, because Grease doesn't require concentration. However, Grease is really optional and it may not be for everybody. So I'm going to give you obviously 2 more choices at second level that I'm going to add into the spell book. If you wanted to take either of those and put that in place of Grease, by all means do so. So I make the assumption that you're going to have 3 encounters a day, each encounter lasting about 4 rounds. That's your typical adventuring day. And for the our 3 ritual spells here at first level, we're going to take Find Familiar, Detect Magic, and Comprehend Languages. Now, Find Familiar you want to cast right away as soon as humanly possible. Now, the fun thing about Find Familiar for you is that you don't really need it to do the help action for you. It might be useful if you have to be casting Firebolt or something like that. But generally speaking, if you take the Owl, which I recommend, you'll be able to give advantage to one of the attacks for one of your other party members. Now, advantage on an attack at first level is incredibly powerful. So you're going to be able to contribute in combat also with the familiar. But of course, the real reason you're taking a familiar is for the scouting. The extra help action is really, really valuable, though. So you have 2 spell slots now and an arcane recovery allowing you to have 3. So you're going to be able to cast a effective spell for every level. Now, Sleep is that's your thing. So you could very well make the argument that you don't want grease at this level, that you want an offensive piece like Burning Hands, which I'll talk about at level 2, or Thunder Wave, or whatever it is. Then sure, by all means do that. I like having grease in there right away, because if I want the option to be able to have yet another control effect that I need in a big encounter kind of a scenario, and believe me, it had better be at first level a really big encounter to be blowing 2 of your spell slots on. I don't recommend that. Now, in terms of cantrips, I would say I'm not going to worry too much about cantrips, because that's going to get taken care of largely, as you're going to see. You obviously want to have an offensive cantrip. I'm going to suggest Firebolt. This really gets down to what your personal preferences are. I prefer Firebolt. So you want an offensive cantrip. You're going to want Mage Hand, because it's just so useful. Minor Illusion, you can take it now. You get it for free at level 3, but if you already have Minor Illusion at level 3, you can get another cantrip of your choice. So Minor Illusion is arguably the best cantrip in the game. So if you want it now, you can have it, or you can have it later. If you are playing with a human or a halfling, or any race that doesn't have dark vision, then you're going to want to have a light cantrip. So that could be light, it could be dancing lights, whatever. That could be something that you also want to pick. But let's not get too hung up on cantrips, because the wizard has this amazing ability that when they complete a long rest, they're able to trade out one of their cantrips. So it's almost like, in terms of cantrips alone anyway, it's sort of like being a divine character. And at second level, we get Scholar, and we get our 3rd first level spell slot. So with Scholar, we are going to be able to pick one of the skills that we're proficient in from a list. And of that list, there are really only 2 that I would really strongly put as front runners, and that is either Investigation or Arcana. Okay, so for second level spells, I'm going to suggest that you take either Burning Hands or Thunder Wave, one of those. I don't like these spells very much. I don't, because they require you to get close, and as a wizard, I want you to stay far away. You don't have the hit points. You don't have the armor class. You need to be playing positionally. When you see the enemy as a wizard, do not pay attention to where they are now in terms of your position. Pay attention to where they will be next turn. If you do that, or where they can be next turn. If you do that, you're going to save yourself an enormous amount of trouble. And the problem is that Burning Hands and Thunder Waves wants you to abandon position and get up close. And I don't like... Now, sometimes you're forced into close positions and there's nothing you can do about it. But in general, stay away, stay far away, stay very safe. But these are, however, spells that are area of effect, damage spells. They're the best damaging spells you really get. I'm not a fan of Magic Missile. Those would be the damage spell picks here at first level. Take one of those. Thunder Wave is the one I would recommend, because it has 2 things going for it. Thunder is really not resisted very much at all. Fire can be easily resisted by a lot of creatures. I'm not going to say like most or anything, but there is a lot of fire resistance and immunity. But don't let that be the deciding factor. The other thing is that the Thunder Wave has the possibility of a push. So between those 2 points, I give the slight edge. Burning Hands does more damage. Thunder Wave does a little bit less damage, but it has those other 2 things going for it. So I would recommend Thunder Wave. Thunder Wave does have another problem in that it's loud. So that could be one thing to say to not take it. Pick whichever one of those you like. You have an attack option, a damage option. And then for rituals, you want to pick a ritual. So, and there's still some really good ones here at first level. So there's Tensor's Floating Disc. There's Unseen Servant. Identify used to be really important once upon a time, and now it really isn't, unfortunately. So I would think that those 2 would be the ones I would probably... Unseen Servant can be used in some other interesting ways. But there's also Alarm, and there's Illusory Script. Any of those, if you took any of those, you're going to be in good shape. I would probably prioritize something like Unseen Servant, but this is really to taste. But now you have 3 spell slots with the ability to get a 4th with Arcane Recovery, so you are now in the business of being able to have a spell to actually use on shield if it should come up. And I want you to note this, the spell slots, because I don't want you playing hyper aggressive. We're going to talk about that about around level 7 is where you can start thinking of being more aggressive with spell slots. But what we really get out of the Illusion Wizard is the ability to cast a lot, and you'll see what I mean. And that will give you the ability to be more aggressive with spell slots than I would normally. I'm very old school. So I ideally just want to cast one big spell in the encounter, and that's it. I don't, but then you have all these spell slots that did nothing. So I'm going to encourage you here, the way the game is being played now, that you are going to want to be at least more aggressive than that position that I was taking, but only start doing that really around level 7, at the earliest level 6. And now here at 3rd level, we get illusion. We get our subclass. So, and we also get 2nd level spells. So it's a huge, huge level. And I wasn't painting a particularly great picture for you. Sleep will wreck encounters. So you are actually a dominant character right from levels 1 and 2. But now here we are at level 3 and you get 2nd level spells, and that's amazing. And of course we get our subclass, which is equally amazing. But remember folks, we're not going to be talking a lot about amazing class features here. You are a wizard. Spells are what you are. And having more of them and more powerful ones is the very guts of the wizard. So we'll talk about 2nd level spells in just a minute. And now we'll cover illusion, what we get from the subclass. We get Illusion Savant and we get Improved Illusion. So with Illusion Savant, whenever we gain a new spell level, we're going to be able to pick an illusion spell from that level, or it must be a level that we can cast. So whenever we gain a new spell level that we can cast, we get to pick one more spell that is of the illusion class, and we get that for free. But when we get this ability, here at 3rd level, we get to pick 2. Now, 2nd level spells, you are spoiled for choice, and there is no way that you're going to be able to grab everything you want right away, because there's too many good spells at 2nd level. But it just so happens that 2 of the very best spells at 2nd level are illusion spells, and we're going to take them both. We're going to take Invisibility, and we're going to take Mirror Image. Now, as we level up, Mirror Image is going to be basically your main line of defense. We're going to have a couple of other little ways of defending ourselves. Obviously, we always have shield, obviously. But shield is like the last line of defense. Mirror Image is going to be basically our first line of defense. And at the end of this, we're going to get, of this test drive, we're going to get yet another ability, which will also be kind of sharing that front line of defense. But once we're past the point where 2nd level spells are our best spells, we're going to be using Mirror Image basically on round 2 an awful lot. But we get those for free. You get Invisibility and Mirror Image for free. That's amazing. And of course, you still get to pick your 2 normal spells. So I said I was going to talk about the spells later. We're just going to do them all here right now since I'm already talking about them. I didn't think about that very carefully. So for the other 2 spells, we're going to take Web, of course, which is an encounter ending spell theoretically. When I say encounter ending, that is a bit of hyperbole. Okay, I don't really mean that, because if that were the case, then this game would be very, very, very boring. What I mean is that when you cast a control spell, you hope that you end the encounter. Does the spell have the capability of ending the encounter? That's what I really mean. It has that capability. Will it? No. It will probably cripple the encounter, and that's really what you want. That's kind of maybe not your best case scenario, but it's your best case realistic scenario for a controller. If you can cripple the encounter right out of the gate, then this is very, very easy. Web will be able to do that. And you'll be able to count on Web as just like with sleep, you need to account their weaknesses, but both of those spells will track with you for the rest of your career. Now, for the other spell, I'm going to suggest that you take suggestion. I will admit I have an enormous bias to this, but it is biased from great experience of just how powerful suggestion can be. It isn't, however, for everybody. So if you don't have the sense, the feel of when to use that and when it can really just do something amazing for you, then it's not that great of a spell. I mean, you're always going to be able to find obvious uses for it, but it's that subtle use of suggestion in the right moments against the right opponent or the right situation. Suggestion is one of those spells that isn't necessarily a combat spell. It's a spell that allows you to solve problems. Let's just put it that way. So it's a utility spell, but with suggestion, you may not even have an encounter, whereas you might have had an encounter otherwise. Now, for the other spell, this does become a bit of dealer's choice here. I'm going to suggest Misty Step because it's such a great spell. However, if you went with Cloud Giant, don't bother. Misty Step is also one of those things. What I like about it best for combat is that it can be a really great get-out-of-jail-free card. Having a get-out-of-jail-free card, just like having an I win button, like Sleep and Web are, having a card is really great to have. But if Misty Step was not your thing, then you might want to be thinking about, these are both spells that I would put on the, I want to shop for these as often as possible, or hope I find them in scrolls or spell books or whatever, is Rope Trick and Spider Climb. Spider Climb is one of those spells that if you have it, you can do a lot of the kind of things, the kind of utility effect that you get from Fly. There's very little difference to the outcome of what you can do with Spider Climb too. Your Spider Climb has obviously got a slight limitation to it because you just can't go up into the air. You have to have a surface that you can climb, but that's generally not that difficult to do. So Spider Climb is great. Rope Trick is one of those things that if you have a party that is very, very dependent on short rests, everyone's going to love you with Rope Trick, because whether the DM likes it or not, you can make a short rest happen. So it's one of those things that if you had it and a party with that kind of composition, then that definitely, I think, jumps into that position. So definitely take Web. I'm recommending Suggestion, but outside of that, I would go with something like Misty Step or Spider Climb, and possibly Rope Trick if you had the right kind of party. But bear in mind, whatever of those you have picked, we're going to be able to pick them again here in the next level, or you're going to want to put them on your shopping list, because there are still other great spells here to get at second level, and you should be wanting to have them. So finishing out the other subclass feature, Improved Illusions. When you are now getting the Minor Illusion cantrip, and you get that for free. If you already have taken it, then you get another cantrip of your choice. Great. You no longer need verbal components when you're casting illusion spells. That's very good. And if the illusion spell has a range of 10 or better, it adds 60 feet to its range. Now, I want you to mark this, because remember, what we're going to be taking as we level up, we're always going to be grabbing illusion spells. So as you imagine that spell, as I'm talking about it, because I may or may not mention it directly, just bear in mind now that you are going to add 60 feet of range to that. And why that's important for illusions, if it is a deceptive illusion, that allows more separation between you and the illusion, which means that you're going to create more of the possibility that that illusion is in fact real, rather than if they see you in the area and you're moving your hands around, because you still have the other components to consider. And some illusion spells, like we'll be getting when we get third level spells, are offensive combat spells. So just having extra 60 feet of range, trickery, forget about that. Just having an extra 60 feet of range to play with a spell for combat is obviously great. Now, with improved illusions, when we cast minor illusion, we can get both the audible and the visual component of that illusion. So that's very, very good. And we can cast it as a bonus action. Now, minor illusion lasts for a minute, but it doesn't require concentration. So this has all kinds, like unparalleled ridiculousness attached to it. The kinds of things you're going to be able to just have fun with at will and creating your own little reality as you move around in the world is fantastic. Now, it does have combat possibilities to it as well. So it creates a 5-foot cube of whatever the illusion is. And it's a bonus action. So in combat, if you were to cast, the typical thing with minor illusion is to cast a crate or a barrel or a rock that takes up that kind of space. And then you could hide behind that. And that's fantastic. Now, doing the actual hide thing is an action. So that's a bit of a problem. So, but if you've cast your big spell, so let's say, let's just take a turn here for a moment, and you cast web here at third level. So you cast web, and then as a bonus action, you cast whatever the illusion is that you're going to use as cover. In round 2, you can go and then take the active hide behind it, or you could simply also move behind it. Now, I prefer this as the option because you're not actually gaining the effects of real cover, but you are blocking line of sight. Now, it's a 5-foot cube. In my book, now this is where the Goliath isn't going to make great use of this because they're so tall. But if you are playing if you are playing human, I would recommend making them 5 feet tall for this very reason. Or short, 4'11", say, just to exploit this. So that you can realistically tell a DM, drawing a line from here to here. I know technically they don't do that, and I don't know why here in the new rules. But if you have a 5-foot cube in front of you and you are shorter than that cube, and there's a line between you and the target, then they can't see you, right? So if they can't see you, even though you don't get the effect of cover, they can't see you, which means the opponent, if they're making an attack roll, has disadvantage. Now, I'm not saying you have the invisible condition or anything like that. That's what you get by hiding. I'm talking about simply blocking line of sight. And I want that done in a very economic action-wise way. Why? Because I want actions available because it is a bonus action. Now, that would mean that you would have your action to hide with it, and then you could still use a bonus action to cast yet another minor illusion. Now, I personally would, just as a silly point here, I wouldn't make a barrel and I wouldn't make anything like that. I would make some kind of like mirror, a 5-foot cube mirror that's just standing there in the battlefield, because I'm not trying to trick you, and you can see that it's magic that I'm casting. But why would you think it's necessarily an illusion as opposed to something that has an effect that is there purposely to block your line of sight? Now, if they should spend their action to take the study action and see that it's an illusion, you're forcing them to waste an action on the illusion. That's great. That's a total win. So who cares? They wasted an action. That's far better than getting disadvantage on an attack. Way better. Because you're just going to cast another one. So this is really why I would recommend thinking about playing a small character, is to make best use of this feature. The illusion features are not really all that amazing. They're good. They're solid. This one has a lot of potential. It's just the way the rules are being worded right now with line of sight. It's a little dicey. So just to be on the safe side, I'm going to recommend that you strongly consider playing a small character if this kind of idea appeals to you, because it's going to give you places that you can easily hide. Now, if you're a halfling or a gnome or whatever it is, and you've got a 5-foot cube, and you just simply walk behind that thing, that should end the argument. They can't see you. If you're a human size, if you're 6 foot tall or whatever as a character, there you might need to take the hide action. But I would say that any of those characters, just as a point, I'm not saying you would have the invisible condition. I'm just simply saying they can't see you, which is very different than having the invisible condition. So at 4th level, we get our ASI. Now I'm going to suggest that we take Warcaster here. You're not probably going to use some of the other features of Warcaster. I'm simply just worried about getting... You have a lot of concentration spells that you're going to be casting throughout your career. So I just want you to have another way of making sure that your concentration saves are secure. You've already got the aggressive feat with Alert. Warcaster is the other end of that. Now, theoretically, with Alert, and the combination, I should point this out, with Alert and Find Familiar, because you do have Find Familiar. Of course, with that combination, you're able to, the Familiar will be rolling its own initiative, and you will be able to swap with it. So you gain not only the bonus that Alert gives you, you have access to pseudo advantage in this kind of a situation for Alert. So with all that in mind, the whole idea of playing a controller well is that you don't have to roll for concentration saves very much. But they can happen, they will happen. So with that in mind, I'm going to suggest that you take Warcaster. For your other spells, I'm going to suggest that you take, it's a ritual. I think you should strongly look at Augury. Augury is one of those rituals that is not the best, but it's better than nothing. And it can certainly be helpful, or it can be a big goose egg. It just kind of depends on the DM. But what it does give you is it gives your DM a way out. So if they're wanting to find a way to help you, and a lot of DMs look for these ways, if you offer up a ritual like Augury, you may get more than the spell actually. Like, you may get a very concrete kind of answer. You're not going to get details because the spell doesn't allow it, but you can get a very solid sense from the DM. So it's a way of giving your DM an excuse to throw you a lifeline. Shatter is another pick. And of course, whatever you didn't pick from before, you could take now. So Rope Trick, whatever, all those combinations, Misty Step, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just throwing these out there now because another level has passed. So while those may have been on your shopping list, here at this pick now, you definitely want to consider those that you didn't get before. Or you could think about something like Shatter. Shatter's going to get outpaced very, very quickly, but it is a follow-up cast that you'll be able to do. And remember what I talked about earlier in the video is that we're going to be a bit more aggressive with spellcasting than I would normally be, because when we hit 6th level, we're going to be getting the ability to cast 2 extra spells for free. So with Warcaster, you have the 18 intelligence, and you now have both the offensive taken care of part of the turn and a defensive part of the turn. You are now very solid, and you're about to hit 5th level where everything blows up. And at 5th level, everything does blow up, because here at 5th level, you get access to 3rd level spells. Now, for just about any character, 5th level is a huge level, but gaining 3rd level spells when you are a full caster and your name is a wizard for a class, this is where you begin to truly just simply taking over Dungeons and Dragons. Now, for the 2 spells that we just get to pick, we're going to take Fireball, and we're going to take Leomund's Tiny Hut. Why? Why am I not taking that other spell? That other spell that's so famous at 5th level for characters to take as a 3rd level spell. Oh, that's right, because we get it for free with Illusion. That's right. Hypnotic Pattern is an illusion spell. So obviously, we're going to take that for free. Thank you very much. So here at 5th level, we got arguably the best 2 combat spells in the game at this level. And we got arguably the best ritual in the game. Realistically, in the game. Leomund's Tiny Hut. Leomund's Tiny Hut allows for long rests to happen whenever you need them, whenever you want them, in very much the same way Rope Trick allowed for short rests. It is invaluable. Obviously, the damage Fireball can do, I don't need to explain. Hypnotic Pattern, I don't need to explain. So the power jump that you are providing. Not only are you dominating encounters now, you've been dominating them before, but now you've got those and still, you've still got the others. Now, bear in mind that Hypnotic Pattern and Web and Sleep don't play nice together because they're all concentration spells. That's why we're taking damage spells. And remember, we took Grease for that reason. So that's another control option that you can throw out into the field. But having the ability to follow up a control spell with a damage spell is not something I would normally do. And I'm not saying you should do it now, but it's getting very close. Come level 6, level 7 is when we start being able to make that switch. We have 2 third level castings, which means, of course, we have 3 because of Arcane Recovery. So in every encounter now, we can either drop Hypnotic Pattern or we can drop Fireball. And then if you did want to make another defensive choice, of course you can with Mirror Image. This is at the point where you could start using Mirror Image regularly. But don't just cast it to cast it. If you don't feel you need it, don't cast it. If you did take something like Shatter, that may be a thing that is more so Fireball than Shatter. I mean, Shatter seems really feeble in comparison to Fireball, but it's still area of effect damage, and they just took Fireball. Or Hypnotic Pattern Shatter, whatever, but you can't go like Hypnotic Pattern Web, obviously. And now at level 6, we get Phantasmal creatures. So now we get 2 more spells, and we always have them prepared. So we have Summon Beast and Summon Fae, always prepared. We can cast each of these now once a day without expending a spell slot. And if we do, the spell is cast as normal, but the creature's hit points are halved. Now, I'm not trying to oversell these spells. They're very good spells. They're like on that borderline of very good. To me, I can be a very stingy grader. They're on that borderline between good and very good. They're right on the line. They're like a B minus kind of a spell. Definitely not great like an A would be. So something like a B minus, although saying that it sounds a bit harsh. They're good spells, though. They're definitely good. And it's great that you can cast them without a spell slot. But here's the problem. They're both concentration spells. So while this sounds really great and really, really wonderful, they are concentration spells. So what are we going to do with them? If you are in a combat where maybe Hypnotic Pattern wasn't the thing to do, maybe Fireball was the thing to do, maybe because the creatures are going to be immune to Charm or something like that, that can negate a Hypnotic Pattern. If damage was the way you had to go, then you could toss out for free one of those 2 spells. Or you could use them in a way that I'm going to primarily suggest, which is to use them either in encounters that don't demand your best spells. Because remember, like if you were to use Web and say, well, Web is a second priority spell now, but you have a second in comparison to Hypnotic Pattern, but you've got things like Mirror Image that you could use that second level spell slot on. So if you needed to contribute to this encounter in some way, but it doesn't require your best, then don't give them your best. Give them a half hit point version. And if you needed to in that kind of trash encounter, you could cast them both after the first one dies. But what this gives you is a real sense of assurance that as you're going through the day and you start casting more and more aggressively here, and this is the level where we can begin to really think about doing that you always have those 2 spells. You've always got them. And that's a great thing to have. I mean, they're not going to end encounters. They're not going to cripple encounters, but they will help. You will have done your bit for the party because you're still going to be contributing with Find Familiar. You're still contributing like crazy. And I know I haven't been spending much time on this, but with rituals, you're, Lehman, Tiny Hut, et cetera, comprehend languages. You're solving problems all over the place. So you are definitely contributing. And of course, in combat, you're generally contributing mightily with the best control spells in the game. So what this speaks to me as is your ace up your sleeve. So when everything else fails and you've gone through all these encounters, you've you've gone more than 3 encounters and yet there's still another encounter, or it's just a garbage encounter kind of a situation. That's where I think the use of these spells is best used. Summon Fae obviously has some little tricky things you can do with it. Summon Beast is much more straightforward. They're both solid. They're both good. The half hit point thing is not that big of a deal because they didn't have great hit points to begin with. So if you're wasting an attack from an opponent on them, and they could still miss that attack, that's something too. That's something else that you're contributing is a drawn attack. And of course, there's the attacks and whatever mischief the Fae is going to be able to create for you. So it's a very fun ability, and it's an ability that, as a wizard, would give me a lot of sense of security that at least I always have this. It allows you to splurge on an encounter and just luxuriate in casting a little bit more than I normally would. And who doesn't want to do that? And still be responsible for the party for not burning everything up to show off or something, because you still got that for an encounter. Now, spells to pick here. We get 2 more spells for the spell book. I'm going to strongly suggest that you take Counterspell. Counterspell is an overrated spell, in my opinion, because it depends on having casters, or it's useless. So the thing about Counterspell is that if you don't have it and you are facing a caster, you're going to punish yourself that you didn't take it. So I think that you have to take a Counterspell. And then, of course, something like Fly is something I would strongly, strongly consider. And now here we are at 7th level. And this is where things really blow up for you, because now the separation, that separation curve between you and everybody else begins to get wider and wider and wider. Because you get 2 spells that are absolutely astonishing spells, and we're going to grab them. They're not illusion spells. They're the 2 best spells at this level in the game. And it's Polymorph and Dimension Door. Dimension Door has enormous utility. It is the ultimate get out of jail free card. And it also just has enormous utility for being able to cover a distance that may not otherwise be coverable. And of course, Polymorph can just radically switch an encounter off. You can basically I win with Polymorph at this level. Now, this is where we're only getting 1 spell slot, though. But of course, we have 2 because of Arcane Recovery. So this is now that point. This is that tipping point where we can start really thinking about it, because we've got 4 first level slots, 3 second, 3 third, 1 fourth. Actually, 2 fourth with Arcane Recovery. So if we have the 3 encounters a day, 2 of them we have devoted to, say, Polymorph at this level. I think I would reserve them unless an emergency happens, and then you use Dimension Door, because you can still back up other encounters with what we've got in the bank. But if we went 2 of those 3 with Polymorph and kind of I win, great, then you have, for another encounter, you've got your choice of Fireball, you got your choice of Hypnotic Pattern. You could always, if it's a garbage encounter, you could always be using Web, or you could be using Sleep, whatever. You've got those choices. But those are round 1 choices. So what is your round 2 choice now looking at level 7? And having those 4th level slots available to you now. Because now, in those 3 encounters, if you just burned those, you've got this entire block of spells that aren't being used. So maybe the first level spells are all being used up with Shield. Let's just assume that. You got all your 2nd level and all your 3rd level. Well, what do you do with them? Well, obviously 1 of your 3rd at this point is going to, just to meet my quota here of 3 a day, 1 of those is going to be used, your 3rd level slots. That's still 2 3rd level slots and 3 2nd level slots. So now, can you just ritualistically go into casting magic mirror image on round 2? Yeah, you can. So now you've got your big control spell up. Now you've got mirror image up. I've already told you, you've burned all 4 shield spells, meaning that once they get past all that, they're still having to get past shield. So, and if they do get past that, you have your Warcaster ability to be able to not have to worry about concentration saves as much. So you're not losing spells. You might get hit. You probably won't. And now you still have 2 third-level spell slots to deal with those 3 encounters. So you could reserve those for counterspell, and you have rituals, so you're dealing with all your utility problems are dealt with by your spell book. It's amazing. So now, when I've talked about all these other casters, I'm always thinking about, well, you need utility for this and that. But most of those situations for a wizard is handled out of the book. So you've still got 2 third-level spells to cast here at 7th level after I've just described your first 2 rounds of every combat in 3 encounters. And after all that is said and done, you've still got phantasmal creatures for use in emergencies, or if you wanted to burn them for a trash encounter. So you've got the ability to counter, even though you're probably not going to need it. So what could those be used for? They could be used for follow-up fireballs if the situation is calling for it. You could be using them for counterspell. You could be using them for fly. Now, if you're using them for fly, you're probably going to be using that as a utility option. That is something that you can't deal with out of the book. So at this point, this is where you can begin to really start going aggressive. Because if you burned all those things, you are through 3 encounters having just cast and cast like crazy. But you've still got phantasmal creatures. So if a 4th encounter does show up, you've got 2 creatures you could throw at it. If you only threw 1 at it and yet a 5th encounter were to show up, you've got 1 left for that too. So do you see what I'm saying now? There is your ability to be aggressive with spells as an illusionist. And remember, you're casting minor illusion whenever you feel like it as bonus actions. And as I mentioned before with Grease as another control option, you've got choices like crazy. And remember that you're going to be adding rituals, so that's even going to expand even in a greater way what you're going to be able to do with utility. This is why wizards are so crazy powerful. And this is why, actually, it's not that phantasmal creatures is great. It's good. Why it's great is that it frees up other spells to use, and that's what's going to make it fun to play and great. Now, for our illusion spell that we get to pick, probably your best choice here at 4th level is Greater Invisibility. So I'm not the greatest fan of Greater Invisibility, and I'm going to tell you why. It's a concentration spell. And while the effect of Greater Invisibility, who wouldn't want that? You just simply can't make great use of it for yourself, and it isn't necessarily serving anybody very well for you to cast it on them because it's still concentration. And while that effect is very good for them, is that better than Hypnotic Pattern or Polymorph or another concentration effect? I just don't think so. I mean, it's the one I would take at 4th level, but I'm not going to suggest that you take it. I'm going to suggest that you go back to 3rd level and grab Major Image. Major Image kind of covers the whole bases of what you might want out of an illusion spell. I'm talking about trickery illusion here. And in that kind of vein, since you are casting it outside of combat, if you cast it with a 4th level slot, it doesn't require concentration. There's going to be plenty of situations where it's just going to come in handy. And remember, you get the extra 60 feet of it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't have to use verbal, all that. So it's a great spell. Some DMs don't play nicely with illusions. It's one of the things that I have against Phantasmal Force. I meant to talk about it at 2nd level. I love the spell. I can't really recommend it. Because there's just better choices for combat, and it's a fun spell. It's a great spell. It's a creative spell. I love all those things. But Major Image is one of those things that now, I mean, you could go back and get Phantasmal Force if you really wanted to. But the big deal out of Major Image is that it's got out of combat possibilities, and Phantasmal Force really doesn't. You're casting that on one individual as opposed to creating an illusion that's just sitting there in the world. And at 8th level, we get our ASI, and we're obviously just putting our intelligence to 20. For our 2 spells that we're going to pick, we're going to take Arcane Eye, and we're going to take Divination. Divination is another ritual. It's better than Augury, and it's a ritual. So that's the great pick here. Arcane Eye is another out-of-combat utility spell, not a ritual, but Arcane Eye is fantastic. Just an amazingly good spell. Now, neither of those are combat spells. If you really, really wanted to take combat spells, I don't think you need them. Yeah, I'm just not going to recommend a combat spell here. I just don't think it's worth it. Arcane Eye is pretty much a must-grab spell. Divination is arguable, but because it's a ritual, I think it's invaluable as a ritual. And any kind of ritual that's going to give you a chance to do something else, you want to grab that ritual. And the combat spells that are here don't mean as much to me as having something like Divination would. All right, 9th level. And folks, this is where the game, as I've been talking about this angle of inference growing and growing between you and everybody else, this is where it's you. You stand alone. You have the one spell, nobody else gets it. And you do. You get 5th level spells, and of course, I'm not going to mince words. We're taking Wall of Force. Wall of Force is an encounter-ending spell in the truest sense of the word. It can end an encounter in the right encounter, not every encounter. And it doesn't need luck to do it. At the minimum, Wall of Force will wreck an encounter. And at best, it will so heavily cripple it that it becomes academic that you're going to win. This is... Wall of Force is one of those spells that drives DMs crazy because it stayed in the game. It's been this way from AD&D days on to now, and it's just there, and it's amazing. The DM's best chance to stop it is to counter it. Now, there are things that can be done. There are. It's just not commonly going. Counterspell's not going to come up all that often. So I don't want to make it sound like you win every single encounter, in the game. It's just that for the sake of most experiences, there's not much they can do. Now, you are, again, spoiled for choice here. There are so many spells. I'm going to suggest that for the other spell, many of you can probably guess, because this is the 5th level spell when it's available, I always say take it, is scrying. Utility spells, being able to do something like what you can do with scrying is invaluable. I love it, but there are many other spells to consider. There's animate objects, very strong single target combat kind of spell. There's synaptic static, which is doing fireball damage that you were doing at 5th level, but it does have a very nice debuff to it, and it's psychic damage. But I'm not worried about combat because I got Wall of Force. So, if that fails, I still got Polymorph as a really, really reliable option. So I want the utility. So I want to rule you with Wall of Force, and of course I want to deal with this with scrying. So now the question becomes, what do we pick for the illusion spell? And we have some choices here. We have the fun one. The fun one is Dream. And Dream, you can basically become someone's personal Freddy Krueger. And it's just an enormously fun spell. And it doesn't have to be that mean or anything like that. You can make it whatever you want. It's an illusion spell, but it allows you to do things that no other spell in the game allows you to do. And anytime you have access to something like that, you should strongly look at it. But it is what it is. It's going to be useful, but it's far more fun than it is useful. I'm not saying that its level of usefulness justifies me allowing myself to recommend it to you. But it is also unparalleled fun. Now, if you're a very creative person and you can really think of a lot of interesting things to do with this dream, you could go to town with something like this. The other spells, Creation is oddly enough an illusion spell. That's a very useful spell. And then there's Seeming. And Seeming, when you get right down to it, is essentially like party-wide Disguise Self. Now, Disguise Self is an amazingly good ability. And for infiltration purposes, which often happens in D&D, it's pretty hard for me not to recommend taking that. As much as I want to say take Dream, I have to, from a practical standpoint, say take Seeming. I'm not trying to downplay Seeming. Seeming's great. It's wonderful. That's why I'm telling you to take it. But Dream is just a lot more fun. And I love the creativity also with creation. But yeah, take Seeming. Now, I forgot to mention at 8th level, because it was so quick, that you got another 4th level spell slot. And here at 9th level, you got another one. So you got a 5th level slot, which means you have 2 with Arcane Recovery, and you have 3 4th level spell slots. So now let's go back again and take a look at what encounters will look like with this kind of thing. So your 2 hardest encounters, Wall of Force, done. Next, you have your choice of a still very good Polymorph. You could be using it to that slot to be upgrading, casting Major Image to allow for that to be standing there without concentration. You could be casting. Casting it with a upcasted Fireball if you needed damage. Remember, 2 of those 3 encounters done with Wall of Force. Done. Now, probably Polymorph is going to be good enough for that 3rd encounter. And you still got 2 more. And the 3 3rd level slots, and the 3 2nd level slots, and the 4 1st level slots. Now I ask you, how many times are you going to need Shield and Major Image? Shield and Mirror Image, when 2 of those encounters, you're nuking it with Wall of Force. I mean, I am speaking slightly hyperbolically here, but only slightly. Remember, you have Alert. Your proficiency bonus is now 4, so you're getting an extra 4 to that, and you're rolling with pseudo advantage with the Familiar. And you're able to drop Wall of Force on the encounter. It's mop-up time after that. In most encounters, you could get counterspelled, whatever. Those things, something could go wrong. Of course, I'm talking about most situations. So, do you even need 4 castings of Shield in a day? Probably not. So what could those 1st level slots be used for? Well, I mean, sleep, grease. That might be useful now. As stupid as it may sound, because you don't need that many Shield spells anymore, tossing out a stupid little grease spell when you've got Wall of Force up and you're now aggressively casting grease in that same kind of encounter, to be humiliated by something like grease would really be something. So that's just what you could do there. Of course, with 2nd level slots, you could drop Shatter. That's a nice damage option. Obviously, you could do Fireball. So you are spoiled for choice. You've got a 4th level slot, 3 3rd, all that. The wizard is insane. And of course, 1 or 2 of these slots are going to be wanting for utility, but mostly the spell book has your utility covered. So this is where the wizard's just simply the supremacy of the wizard really, really asserts itself. So I have compared certain classes, like the Glamour Bard, to a better controller slightly than any wizard, and I think that that's true. But what the wizard can do is a bit different. I mean, it can't do all the cool stuff that the Glamour Bard can do. It can't. It wishes it could. It can't. But it can do all this other stuff. So it's an amazingly being a wizard is amazingly powerful. What? Because you're able to do that largely because of the accumulation of spell slots, but you can burn through those aggressively, partially because of the sheer amount of spell slots you've got versus encounters per day normally. But you've also got in the back of your mind that if anything goes wrong, or whatever, you've got those phantasmal creatures that you can always pull out of your hat. And that's what you pull out of your hat when you have to have it. It's just a really fun character. And then mirror image or minor illusion all over the place. Just what fun. What fun. Now, at 10th level, I think that you need to take, in terms of spells that you're going to take, I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and grab 2 more rituals. 2, because they're so good. Contact Other Plane and Rary's Telepathic Bond. These are going to just add to the ridiculous power level. When you're able to cast 5th level spells for free, then you have to grab those. I wanted you to take Scrying because I think that it's just going to always be more useful, but you could very easily make an argument with Rary's Telepathic Bond. So if you wanted to swap those, you certainly could. And of course, we get our 10th level ability from Illusion, which is Illusory Self. When you get hit, if you have a reaction available, you can take a reaction and you can make an illusory image of yourself, which comes up and takes the hit. That illusion then dissipates, but the attack misses you. And you can use this once, and then when you complete a short or a long rest, you gain another use of it as well. So an amazingly good ability, really strong. I mean, who doesn't want that? So this is where now defensively you're insane. I don't know what to say. It's madness. When you combine that with mirror image, and then if you followed my kind of thing now, if you can kind of picture it, you've got mirror images of yourself running around in almost any given battle, and you're popping up mirrors as well on the battlefield round after round to block line of sight. And then you've got now this, the kind of picture you're going to be able to create in any given combat. Not only is it fun, it's powerful, it's effective. You've got the spell book with everything that a wizard does. It's just what's not to love in playing a wizard? If I were to play a wizard, would I play the illusionist? Probably. It's a tough choice. Divination's awfully strong, but I kind of think that everybody came out very well for the wizard. I think you could argue that nobody got beefed up as much because illusions were considered almost unplayable, but now they found some ways to make at least these features so desirable. You don't even have to focus on trickery illusion to be a very good illusionist. I love trickery illusion, but DMs don't often play nicely with it. So would I play an illusionist? It would be in my list. It would be at the top of my list for wizard choices, to be sure. And I love wizards. All right. Well, that's all I've got. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please share, please subscribe. And if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, you can always search for a secret door. Until next time, I cast bless on all of you.